As a former Satanist, I thought I had seen it all, until the day I was dragged into hell. I saw horrors, heard screams, people in agony. Then I looked to my side, and he tells me that. You know, folks, looking back at my life, I still remember how it all started. I was just 17 years old, a searching soul with so many questions. I'd always been drawn to the unknown, to the mysteries that seemed hidden from plain sight. There was something in me that wanted to understand what was behind the veil, what others couldn't or wouldn't see. Back then, I spent hours in the public library, my young mind hungry for knowledge about the occult. And let me tell you something, when I say occult, I don't mean anything fancy. It simply meant what was hidden from me, what I didn't understand. Yet, I wanted to know more, to see more. I remember sitting at my small desk in my parents' home, pen in hand, writing a letter to that church in San Francisco. Yes, a real letter on paper. This was before emails and instant messages, when patience was part of the process. I sent it to their postal box address, which I had to find by going to the American consulate and searching through microfilms of phone directories. Can you imagine that? The things we did before the internet. In my letter, I wrote that I wanted to learn more, to perhaps become a part of their organization. They sent back a standard response in English, which was a problem since my English wasn't very good. Just basic words, nothing too fancy. So I replied in my native language saying, "Look, if you want to communicate, you'll have to do better than sending me letters in English." So I thought they would ignore me after that. Weeks passed, maybe 3 months or so, with no response. I figured they'd rejected me. It felt strange, you know. I'd heard about how God accepts everyone with open arms. But here was this other path. That seemed to be saying, "No, you're not good enough for us." They had asked for all sorts of personal information, blood type, habits, photographs, like I was applying for some exclusive job. I sent everything, and then silence. But the Lord works in mysterious ways, and so do the forces of darkness. One quiet afternoon, I was at the Cultural Center Library, deeply focused on a book. The place was nearly empty that day. Then, a well-dressed gentleman sat down right next to me. Now, I should tell you, I looked quite different back then. Long hair, heavy metal t-shirts, not the kind of appearance that usually attracted positive attention. My first thought was that maybe this man was interested in me romantically, so I politely explained that I wasn't interested. But then something happened that sent chills down my spine. He called me by my name. He knew where I lived, down to the street name. He knew all the details I had written in that form months ago. "Would you like to join a school of initiates?" he asked, as casually as someone might ask if you want a cup of coffee. I felt strangely flattered. Here was someone treating me with respect, not judging me by my appearance. He invited me for coffee and we chatted for a while. I learned that what I had contacted wasn't just a small group in America, but something much larger, a global organization, with branches all over the world. He asked if I wanted to be part of their study group right here in my hometown. I was curious about their philosophy, their teachings, but then he said something that should have been a warning. "This isn't for everyone, and once you're in, there's no going back." At 17, what did I care? In my foolish teenage mind, I didn't think I'd live very long anyway. I was practicing martial arts and getting into street fights just to test my skills. I thought, one of these days someone's going to finish me off anyway, so what do I have to lose? So I agreed. They arranged to pick me up near my home, by the hospital and the Catholic church, right at the bus stop. A black luxury car pulled up, the EE kind that successful businessmen drove. I had never even been in such a nice car before. Sometimes I couldn't even afford the bus fare and had to sneak in through the back door. The man who had approached me in the library was there, dressed like a corporate executive in a suit and tie. I later learned he held a public position, and to this day he's still connected to that group. As we drove, the neighborhoods changed. We went into areas of the city I barely knew, wealthy districts with enormous houses. Eventually, we pulled up to a mansion, a real mansion, not just a big house. I had never been inside such a place before. Crystal chandeliers, thick carpets, everything screamed money and power. What struck me most was how everyone treated me, with respect. No one looked at me with prejudice or suspicion because of my appearance. This was different from my experiences with traditional churches, where people would physically move away from me when I entered, as if I might rob them. Those experiences had left me feeling bitter toward organized religion. I started attending their study sessions. They used overhead projectors back then. This was before digital presentations, and showed us various images. The teaching began subtly. They tried to convince us that God wasn't exactly as we'd been taught, that the devil wasn't really evil, just the necessary opposite to God. You need to understand darkness to comprehend light, they said. Night isn't bad and day isn't good. They're just different sides of the same coin. Happiness only exists because sadness exists. You need to taste bitterness to value sweetness. It was like the positive and negative wires that light up a bulb. You need both. The initial idea seemed balanced, reasonable even. I thought, yes, there does need to be equilibrium in the universe. But then they would subtly slip in other images. A starving child in Africa, innocent people suffering, and ask, if God is good, why does he allow innocent children to suffer like this? Why do the wicked prosper while good people suffer? Is God really good if he creates so many rules, calls everything sin, and threatens everyone with hell? And then they would present their alternative. The adversary doesn't restrict you. He offers freedom, the chance to experience life without bounds. That's why he left God's presence. He wanted freedom. They worked slowly, planting seeds of doubt, reframing everything I thought I knew, and I, young and searching, began to listen. You see, they weren't just talking about philosophy. Behind those reasonable-sounding words was something darker, something they only revealed gradually. They could use certain rituals, they claimed, to hurt people, to cause illness or manipulate minds. They spoke of technologies and frequencies that could affect your thoughts, create depression, fear, anxiety, or despair. They could plant thoughts in your mind, manipulate your emotions. When I first heard this, I asked how it was possible. This is neuroscience, they said. It's real, we can destroy your mind. They had equipment, they claimed, and knowledge passed down through generations, dating back to the Middle Ages. I didn't realize then what I was getting myself into. I didn't understand the web being woven around me, but looking back now with the wisdom of years and the grace of God, I can see how they were luring me in, step by step, lie by lie, making darkness seem like light. The scariest part wasn't the rituals or even the claims of mind control. The scariest part was how normal it all began to seem, how reasonable, how logical. That's how deception works. It doesn't announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. It comes dressed in fine clothes, speaking soft words of wisdom, offering respect and belonging to those who feel they have none. And I was the perfect target. Young, rebellious, hungry for knowledge and feeling rejected by conventional society and religion. I was walking straight into their arms, thinking I was making a free choice, when in reality, I was being carefully, methodically recruited. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would take me to the darkest places a soul can go, and by God's grace, eventually lead me back to the light. They told us that the adversary sought freedom. He didn't want to be constrained anymore. This is where they wove in theology, because they actually know the Bible quite well. They explained how he managed to convince a third of the angels in heaven to follow him. Just think about that. Not a third of Earth's population, but a third of all the angels in heaven. Trillions upon trillions of beings. He persuaded them with something they had never encountered before, lies. In that celestial dimension, these angels had never known deception, so when he told them falsehoods, they accepted them as truth. That's why Scripture calls him the father of lies. According to the Bible, he dragged a third of heaven's angels with him and was cast out. There was a war in heaven, and it all began with a lie. What was this lie? They taught us that he claimed God was too authoritarian, that only God could create and command. Why couldn't the angels that God created have similar powers? They would ask. Why couldn't they create things or lead others? In their teaching, God was portrayed as selfish, unwilling to share his authority or power. It was like a junior employee asking why they weren't getting paid the same as the CEO. The adversary had been close to God. In Jewish tradition, his name was Samael, but the term we commonly use is Lucifer, which means light bearer. It's not actually a name but a title. Satan comes from Hebrew, meaning opponent or adversary, while devil comes from Greek diabolos, meaning one who brings division. These are all terms describing the same fallen being, but most people just know him as the devil, so I'll use that term for simplicity. Gradually, I became convinced that God truly was unjust. I saw this mirrored in churches too, people accusing each other, speaking ill of one another, filled with envy, pride, and arrogance. So much me, and obsession with titles and positions. I am this, I am that. The devil, from my perspective, then seemed more relaxed. He didn't nag anyone, didn't burden people with rules. It reminded me of that principle from Aleister Crowley. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Though in reality, there were rules in Satanism too. The main rule was maintaining secrecy about everything you learned. They claimed to have amassed knowledge from throughout human history. They told us that the Library of Alexandria didn't just burn down by accident. Before it burned, they had removed all the knowledge that wasn't meant for common people. That's why you'll never find written records from Celtic priests, for example. They took this knowledge out of history, the wisdom of the Egyptians about building pyramids, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Key of Solomon, and more. What you find in bookstores, they said, is just plagiarism, just a spark to kindle curiosity. The originals were in their possession, copied by hand over centuries. You could only access these texts after proving yourself worthy. Everything was based on merit. Finally, they judged me ready for initiation. They took me to another location, a massive castle-like structure not far from my hometown. It wasn't like the fairy tale castles you see in Europe, but it was enormous and imposing. There they performed the initiation ritual, a ceremonial process to formally accept me. I made my vows and pledges. The ceremony played heavily on human vanity. I was a broken young man. People on the street judged me by my appearance. I only had friends in the martial arts academy. Outside of that, I was alone. But here, wealthy business people, politicians, high-ranking military officers, they all treated me with respect. I thought, wow, these powerful, rich, famous people are treating me like I matter. Some I recognized from the news. During the ritual, everyone wore hoods. I stood with my back to the audience, facing a kind of altar where the high priests conducted the ceremony. When it ended, they asked me to turn toward the audience. I removed my hood and everyone applauded. Can you imagine how that felt? Being applauded by these powerful figures. My life changed rapidly after that. Business owners placed me in there, companies in elevated positions. I became a financial manager, though I understood nothing about the job. Someone else did the work. I just signed papers and collected the salary and benefits. The money didn't fall from heaven. They helped elevate me. Suddenly I had social status, prestige, money. At the beginning, everything seemed wonderful. Everyone was kind, cultured, and had given me opportunities despite having no qualifications. They put me in a good position, and gradually I learned how to handle the financial area of the company. Initially, I didn't even know how to use the HP calculator that was common at that time. I felt good about my new life. I continued advancing within the organization, learning more rituals, ceremonies of invocation, magical protection circles, and how to summon entities, fallen angels or demons, as we understand them today. I never felt afraid because they sold the idea that these entities were our friends, standing by our side. They would say, the son of fire, fire doesn't burn him. They'd tell me, you're good being in darkness because the world doesn't see you. From darkness you can see who's in the light, but no one sees who's in the dark. That's why it was a secret society. This period of good things lasted about 1.5 years to 2 years. I was just learning the rituals, but I wasn't afraid. I never experienced anything frightening. No strange apparitions at night, nothing. My relationships change though. When you enter the group, your blood family, mother, father, stops being your primary family. The group becomes your family. My loyalty shifted completely. I remained with them from age 17 to 26, quite a long time. My formal initiation happened around my 18th birthday, after almost 1 year in their school of initiates, where they gradually indoctrinated me. Then came the castle ceremony and I was fully accepted. I learned what they called the black arts. Though they never used that term, they called it occult knowledge that couldn't be shared with just anyone. What was this knowledge? There were formulas and invocations for entities. First, you had to be accepted by the entity. You needed to earn its trust. That's why there were protection circles. If you stepped outside the circle before gaining the entity's trust, you could be in danger. You could perform spells to cause discord. If you had a problem with someone, you could perform a ritual that might make them sick or cause them to have an accident. They taught us that God still controls life and death, and these things only work when there's what they called legality. They understood that there is a sacred, divine law established by God. If you break this law, you're subject to punishment. And they could administer this punishment. They positioned themselves as a kind of police force, bringing order, the left hand of God, they called themselves. According to their teaching, if someone claimed to be a child of love but spread gossip, stole or deceived others, if they didn't truly embody love, that person became an easy target. They had broken the law, stepped outside divine protection, and given legal permission for dark forces to touch them. A person might speak a lot about God but not live accordingly. Their words didn't match their inner reality. As I learned these things, it seemed normal to me. I thought, yes, these people deserve what happens to them because they did wrong. I didn't fully understand what the group was doing, but gradually they explained older rituals, ceremonies performed by ancient Egyptians, Aztecs, Incas, and Mayans. Then came the darker aspects. If someone had wronged me deeply, I could ask for help. There were rituals that could cause illness or affliction. Today, they've perfected these techniques, incorporating technology. There are frequencies and wavelengths that can manipulate your mind, cause depression, fear, anxiety, despair, promote hatred, and create thoughts. This is neuroscience. It's real. They could destroy minds. They had equipment, and this knowledge was taught gradually to the group. They've possessed this technology since the Middle Ages, though obviously back then they didn't have Wi-Fi or genetic engineering. Over time, they selected people and shared knowledge, and today it's highly sophisticated. Look at artificial intelligence. Today, Elon Musk has publicly stated that by 2040, he'll have an army of 1 million AI robots ready for war. If there's a war, these robots will fight. Imagine a world with totalitarian control. If you break a rule, these machines can find you through GPS on your cell phone, recognize you with facial biometrics that are everywhere today, and execute you. There are tiny drones the size of mosquitoes that can locate you by GPS, fire a single shot and kill you. These technologies have made traditional magic less necessary in some ways. They've evolved beyond the old methods, though they still use them for other purposes. The ability to manipulate human minds through frequencies and waves, to implant thoughts, create depression, anxiety, or fear, this is real power that they wield. The group began with technologies like HAARP and chemical trails, those planes that release smoke in the sky different from normal condensation trails. When an airplane engine is hot and passes through cold air, it creates condensation. But these were different. They were spraying chemicals. These planes would fly at low altitudes and release columns of smoke, creating artificial clouds. Recently, in Dubai, they made a mistake with the dosage. The desert city was flooded because they used this technology to spray substances into clouds, causing rainfall, but they misjudged the amount. These chemical trails were initially intended to spread aluminum oxide in Earth's atmosphere, which is the best reflector for HAARP waves. The antennas would send signals to the ionosphere that would reverberate back to Earth, potentially causing earthquakes, floods, and other disasters. But let me get back to the rituals. When most people think of black magic, they imagine a cauldron with strange ingredients, cat hair or eye of newt. It's not like that. There are potions, yes, but they're made with herbs, many with hallucinogenic properties. They're taken in precisely calculated doses based on your weight and height. According to them, in the right proportion, these substances activate the pineal gland in your brain. The pineal gland is something that connects you to the spiritual world. When it's activated, you have a better connection with the spiritual plane. Most people have calcified pineal glands. This has been proven in autopsies. Science is still studying this organ today, and some researchers suggest it has something to do with the sacred, with the divine. It's about reconnection, what Jesus came to Earth to do wasn't to found a religion or Christianity, but to provide a path to reconnect us with our Creator. So there I was, learning magic, seeing that it worked, becoming fascinated. I would invoke entities, learn magical words, and gain access to the library of knowledge, always things that only I could have by merit. I was completely captivated. Then suddenly they began shifting the focus. They started talking about how certain entities feed on human life energy, and how your life energy is released when you cease to exist. They began discussing what the Aztecs did, ritual sacrifices that were very common. They made profane comparisons to God in the Old Testament, how God commanded the killing of entire cities, men, women, and children. Why kill women and children? They would ask. Understanding it today, it was an act of God's mercy. If you destroyed just the men, the city's defense, the women would be raped and the children enslaved. So the act of mercy was to take everyone. You have to understand the historical context of each moment, otherwise you'll create confusion when reading the Bible. They started pushing this idea. If God commanded the killing of so many people, what's one life worth? Then they began changing direction even more. They started talking about something called adrenochrome. There's even a video on my YouTube channel where I discuss it. Adrenochrome is produced when a child is placed in a state of extreme terror. I won't describe the methods. I never wanted to see them. I said I couldn't bear it. I can't stand seeing an animal mistreated, let alone a child. The adrenochrome is supposedly extracted at the peak of terror. It has to be type O blood, which is universal. When applied, it supposedly rejuvenates you, boosts your immune system, increases your longevity, and improves your intellectual and cognitive abilities. All this comes from children's blood loaded with adrenaline. There's even a specific age range that's targeted. Experiments were done with rats. They would never publicly admit to human experiments, of course. Old, sick rats were injected with blood from young rats, and the old rats rejuvenated. The diseases they had were cured. So it worked in rats, and the theory was that it could work in humans too. They produce this and sell it on the black market for a fortune. And afterward, these children are never found again. Russia's attack on Ukraine was partly justified by Putin claiming that Russian children were being kidnapped and taken to Ukraine to produce adrenochrome, supposedly to be sent to the United States. News reported that he discovered a laboratory with 50 children in induced comas, because keeping children quiet is difficult. You can look this up. It's public information. Hollywood is supposedly the main consumer. You see people there who seem forever young, who don't age. The number of missing children is extremely high, and they have specific groups that go after them. I always warn my children and others, be careful around strangers offering candy or asking you to come closer to their car. In the past, you could buy ammonia and ammonium hydroxide at pharmacies. You could use these to knock someone out instantly. Much of this was for rituals to extract adrenochrome. This exists even today and is being further perfected with technology. This was part of the rituals that I saw and thought, this isn't right for me. I began to question, you kidnap children, then torture them to take their blood to make a product? It's all sold on the black market, not something you can just go buy openly. When I started questioning these practices, they didn't value my concerns because they see themselves as a pure lineage, like Hitler believed in a pure race. They believe they come from the lineage of Cain, who killed Abel, the first sin of the world, the first murder. Cain had sons and daughters, and the Bible speaks in Genesis 6 about fallen angels, demons, having sexual relations with women. Giants were born, men of great stature but also great intelligence. Then God sent the flood, but they continued to exist after the flood because they kept performing the same rituals. They believe this lineage continues today, not in stature as before, but they've perfected genetic engineering. If you have this lineage of what they call Nephilim, these hybrid beings, a profane generation whose genetic code was modified, then you're part of the family. That's why they asked about my blood type and ran many tests on me. Some people are rejected, others are invited to be pawns in their game. They give these people power for a period, and you have to follow their playbook. They give you money, but you're not from the same lineage as they are. If you're wondering how many people are part of this worldwide, I'd estimate approximately 200 million people. Not all are high-ranking members. There are those from the lineage and those who control things. In Brazil alone, there are at least 1.5 million people involved. Many people in positions of power and fame are connected to this. You make a pact, you're not part of them, but they mediate the deal. I'll elevate you as a singer, a businessman, even the president of a nation like the United States. When you're there, you must do this, this, and this. That's the price you have to pay. If you don't, we'll kill you. According to their doctrine, that's what happened to Kennedy. He didn't accept their terms, so they killed him and his family. The same with Tancredo Neves in Brazil. I remember the ex-wife of Fernando Collor de Mello accused him in a book of performing rituals to reach his position. His treasurer, P.C. Farias, was killed, and they covered it up as a crime of passion. A coroner at the time said the angle of the bullet suggested a third person was involved, but the story was suppressed because they protect their own. Collor's brother also died, a rapidly developing cancer. Ulysses Guimarães, who was the main articulator of Collor's impeachment, also died. These things don't happen by coincidence. They eliminate anyone who gets in their way, and they protect themselves fiercely. Let me address something more current. Madonna recently performed in Brazil, and there was controversy about her showing her breasts and other provocative actions. Some people claimed it was satanic ritual, an apology to Satanism, profaning values. I've been talking about this since 2020. In the sect, they had an agenda that I was exposed to exhaustively. I memorized what they planned to do at each moment, in history, and everything they planned is happening like clockwork. Of course, with God's permission, because it has to happen. It's written in Revelation that it will occur. They had a target for 2023, which is why I created a series of videos called Secret Calendar 2023. I couldn't go into details because of the oath I took and to avoid retaliation. I still receive threats occasionally. Now I talk more openly on my Hotmart platform, Guardians of Time, where I have students and the freedom to blow the trumpet. People need to know the truth. The truth sets you free. Pay attention to the details. 2023 was part of their calendar. In 2023, NASA admitted for the first time, and the Pentagon reinforced this, that UFOs truly exist. They had never affirmed this before. And strangely, they called in theologians to discuss the UFO phenomenon, not ufologists or scientists. This was unusual. I believe in something called the rapture within eschatology. If people suddenly disappear, as written in Scripture, they'll claim these people were abducted by UFOs. But the truth goes back to Nikola Tesla's time. He already had designs for these craft, but the technology of his era couldn't support them. Tesla had an incredibly high IQ of 240, a true genius. He never married because he believed women would disturb his thinking. When he died, he left behind numerous discoveries, including the Wi-Fi technology we use today. He understood it was possible, but the technology wasn't available yet. His thinking was far beyond his time, like Einstein, who understood the mechanics of the universe's functioning, or Newton, who discovered gravity and presented a curved universe model with just a pen, no computers. These were geniuses. Today it's the opposite. They want to dumb down the population. The less intelligent people are, the easier they are to control. So yes, they admitted UFOs exist, but in my understanding, these are actually weapons of war, combat weapons. Many things are happening in the world simultaneously. If you remember, something was tested in 2006. This is public information. Al Gore curiously spoke about global warming. Fast forward to Madonna's show in Brazil, which started at exactly 21:45 on Copacabana Beach, near the waters. There's a detail here. She prohibited Globo TV from filming the first 12 minutes, 12 being a significant biblical number, 12 apostles, 12 tribes. No one could show what happened. I've asked my followers, if anyone was there, show me the video. I want to know what happened in secret. The detail is that Madonna did this tour to celebrate 40 years of her career, and when did she begin? 2023. Let's remember what happened in early 2023. They started talking about UFOs, planting this idea, and strangely calling in theologians. In my secret calendar videos, I always warned that Israel would be attacked. People would say, "No way, they have the Iron Dome, it's impossible." But I explained that Israel would be attacked and invaded because it's the only way to fulfill a biblical prophecy, redrawing the map to fulfill the prophecy of rebuilding the Third Temple where a mosque stands today. The only way to do this is through war. This was triggered exactly on October 7, 2023. Let's look at the chronology. 2023 was also the most violent year in history since World War II. This is public news. It was also the hottest year in history. When Al Gore spoke about global warming in 2006 and won the Nobel Prize in 2007, his message was shelved but later revived during the pandemic by Klaus Schwab, the founder and director of the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. Schwab calls himself the Pope of the New World Order. This is public, he calls himself this. Schwab proposed something called the Great Reset. I have a video explaining this better, as I can't summarize it completely here. The idea seems excellent, but when you look at it closely, it doesn't apply to our reality. They show an attractive facade, but there's another trajectory that will harm people. Remember the Georgia Guidestones? These were often called the American Stonehenge. These stones were recently exploded, but no one knows who did it. A businessman had these stones erected 42 years ago, but his identity and the company involved remained secret. The stones contained astrological and astronomical knowledge, and they also had commandments written in various ancient languages. One of the directives was to reduce the world population to 500 million people. The explosion was caught on camera, but strangely, the footage didn't show who planted the bomb, so reaching 500 million people is one of their targets. What are their objectives? These stones in Georgia, unlike Stonehenge, which was where Druid priests performed their rituals, were constructed by a businessman. They were 45-ton stones, and the nearest quarry was 400 kilometers away. Let me return to Madonna. To understand the chronology, the global warming issue was shelved, but then revived during the pandemic. I don't know if you remember. This is also public. There was an interview with a geophysicist, a PhD professor, from the University of São Paulo, who scientifically proved that global warming wasn't possible from his perspective. The following week, he was fired from his position, lost his job, was cancelled on social media and essentially removed from the scene. You can't go against certain narratives. This is public information. Anyone can access his interview. It's still available today. So Schwab proposed this Great Reset and many countries agreed. But for worldwide acceptance, you need a crisis because the Great Reset promotes order out of chaos. It promotes order for an imminent chaos that we're now seeing unfold. In my secret calendar 2023, I always said that on October 7th, Israel would be attacked. Then on the 13th, there was a declaration of a day of rage, Friday the 13th. Extremists, and I have nothing against Muslims. I have many Muslim friends, but these were extremists like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic State, decreed this day. There were protests worldwide, with extremists attacking Jews everywhere. What happened next? On October 14th, there was a solar eclipse, and astrological signs are observed both in the Bible and by those on the other side. They also base themselves on astrological data. Madonna began her tour exactly on October 14th, 2023, the same day as the Ring of Fire solar eclipse. You might not believe in coincidences, but wait and see that it's not so coincidental. I told my followers that something would begin to happen in April. Why April? Because there's a biblical prophecy in Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus mentions a series of events and talks about the fig tree, which is an allusion to Israel. He says, "When its branches are tender, summer is near. I am at the door, but this generation will not pass away until all these things happen." People took this literally. A biblical generation, according to Psalm 90:10, is 70 years. Israel completed one generation in 2018. On May 14, 2018, Israel was founded on May 14, 1948. Who was president then? Trump, the 45th US president. 5 and 4 make 9, and 9 is a very important number for them. Look at the time Madonna chose for her show. On the US $1 bill, it says in Latin, New World Order. It's already a plan established long ago. What is this plan? Control. Control of everything. But they need to eliminate people because managing 8 billion people in the world is complicated. They're already saying that by 2030, this is part of the Open Agenda 2030, we won't consume beef anymore, but artificial meat. This is part of the New World Order. It's not exactly veganism. You'll have artificial meat with protein. It's like an anti-divine thing, not eating real meat. This new meat will be contaminated with substances. A doctor named Luc Montagnier, who won the Nobel Prize in 2007 for discovering the AIDS virus, gave an interview talking about bee stings. He gave a statistic saying if you're stung by a certain African bee, within 2 years, he corrected himself, you might have a sudden illness. Shortly after that interview, he was found dead in his apartment. We see today young people, children, teenagers, athletes having sudden illnesses. It's because we have 8 billion people in the world. This is a test. They're starting slowly. They want to have 500 million people, which means eliminating 7.5 billion. The WHO itself has already warned that the next wave will be 100 times more potent than the first, with a higher level of contagion. You see that now alcohol at 70% concentration has been banned by regulatory agencies. You can't buy it anymore. Why? Because alcohol eliminates germs. When you sneeze and touch a doorknob, leaving germs that have been genetically altered to survive longer in different environments, hours or even days, alcohol would clean that. They're removing your protection. I know people might be frightened by this information, but there is a happy ending to this. God. Some might ask, isn't it more beneficial in a capitalist society based on consumption to have more people consuming rather than reducing the population to 500 million? But this control isn't based on money. They want to clean up because they consider many people not part of their pure lineage. Since there are 200-300 million of them, they'll keep some alive to work for them. Someone has to serve. Someone has to plant. When genetically modified foods first appeared, everyone was against them. Nobody wanted to consume something genetically modified, but today almost everything is transgenic. If GMOs were 100% good, why would there be a seed vault in Antarctica, storing non-genetically modified seeds? Why do you think Mark Zuckerberg, who has so much information and data on society, built a bunker for himself that cost $1.3 billion? What does he know that we don't? This is public news, you can research it. He built a bunker for himself, his family, and perhaps others, costing $1.3 billion. You might wonder if this has happened at any point in history, or if this is the first time. The New World Order is something that has been gestating for a long time, but it's coming to fruition in our generation. I believe it's actually a privilege to be alive in this time, even though it seems like a curse to witness 7.5 billion people potentially facing elimination. Returning to our chronology with Madonna, I told people to pay attention to April. Jesus talked about a series of things. A generation was completed. Trump was president in 2018 when Israel completed 70 years, one generation. He'll return to the presidency and be re-elected, taking office again in 2025, 7 years after Israel became a nation. Trump is also connected to this numerological, Kabbalistic thing. Madonna finished her tour in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, exactly 7 months after Israel was attacked. This goes beyond mere coincidence. There was a solar eclipse on April 8th. Remember that? This eclipse was part of a combination of factors. At the exact moment of the eclipse, there was a very rare planetary conjunction. The Bible tells us to pay attention to signs in the heavens. Today, astrology is demonized, but it shouldn't be. The Bible speaks about these signs. The less you know about these things, the better they like it. They say crystals are from the devil, essential oils are from the devil. Anything that might connect you better with the divine is labeled as demonic. So on the day of the eclipse, there was also a planetary alignment, and the Large Hadron Collider was restarted at the precise moment of the eclipse's peak. I also want to remind you that in Switzerland, they inaugurated a railway tunnel that's more than 50 kilometers long. It took a long time to build, and many workers died during its construction. The inauguration ceremony is on the internet. It was essentially an homage to the adversary, a celebration attended by elite people from politics and other high positions. The entire event was an apology to the demonic because they believed they were opening a dimensional window or portal there. I told my followers that something would start in April, what we call in eschatology the tribulation period. And sure enough, on the very first day of April, something happened that wasn't widely reported in the news, but you can find it online. Israel attacked the Iranian embassy in Syria. This happened right after Passover, which ended on March 31st. Then came the eclipse on the 8th, aligning three things, including the passing of what some called the Devil's Comet. On April 9th, the first month in the Jewish calendar, Nisan, began. On that same day, there was an anomaly in the ocean. It's on the internet. I included it in my last YouTube video. Initially, it appeared as something enormous in the ocean depths, captured on instruments as a form of energy, but it was huge, bigger than the state of Texas. They said it might be a sea monster, or continental, drift, or a device malfunction. It appeared on the 9th and disappeared on the 11th, vanishing without explanation. Madonna's show in Brazil was on May 4th. Again, note the numbers. 5 and 4 make 9. But let me back up. She arrived in Brazil on April 29th, and interestingly, the floods in the southern region intensified. This might be a coincidence, and as you said, you can connect dots to create any story, but it's worth noting. Moving forward to April 13th, Israel was attacked by Iran. The United States under Biden said, "Don't retaliate, don't strike back," because the border had been opened, letting in many migrants, possibly including extremists. "It might backfire on me, so I won't protect you." But Israel didn't follow orders, they counterattacked. Iran responded by saying they wouldn't retaliate further because urban areas and military bases weren't hit. However, extremists had previously declared they would wipe Israel off the map, but they changed their rhetoric at this point. From my eschatological viewpoint, chaos is necessary so that someone can bring order out of that chaos. When the former president takes power again, he will likely bring peace. But for peace to come, there must be war. There needs to be conflict. So the region will probably be devastated, and then he'll bring peace. He's already been well received, recently being awarded a menorah from Israel with the inscription, Prince of Peace. When he was in power before, he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. There are people who are collaborators and others who give commands. Madonna, for instance, is part of this. She was recruited during a specific period. This is public information that I've researched. There's a group called the Bilderberg Group, perhaps you've heard of them. They're about 130 people, a global elite. They meet every year in luxurious locations, protected by military barriers. No reporters are allowed access. They are very powerful people, businessmen, politicians, high-ranking media figures. They meet annually because they need to adjust the sails. They don't know everything that will happen, so they say something unexpected occurred, let's change the plan, change the strategy. This is just one of these groups. They keep records of their meetings. That's why the cover of The Economist magazine often predicts what will happen, because they know the agenda. Let me give two examples. One Economist cover predicted the attack on Israel exactly as it happened, and this was back in 2013. Another cover from 2016 showed Olympic rings, indicating where something would happen. Brazil hosted the Olympics in August 2016. There was a sun above with a small butterfly, a symbol of spring, and among the many people on the cover was the Brazilian president. Those dressed in black on the cover were part of the club. She wasn't, which was a signal saying we're going to remove her from power. If you watch the documentary Brazil on the Edge, available on streaming platforms, there's a very interesting scene. When they say she was impeached exactly in the Olympic year, people were distracted. Everyone looking at the Olympics, nobody concerned with her impeachment. The vice president took power, and a series of events unfolded afterwards that I won't go into here. It was already predicted that in 2016 there would be a passing of the baton. She would leave and someone else would enter. Why was there a sun with a butterfly, a symbol of spring? Because the vice president's birthday is September 23rd, the beginning of spring in the southern hemisphere. It could be a coincidence, of course. Power is connected to control because they place people they want in key positions. This Bilderberg group, for example, invited a future US president to their meeting around 1991 saying, "We'll give you power, you'll be president, and when you're there, you'll do this and that." He wasn't even a candidate yet, didn't have a party. Around 1993 he became president and served 2 terms. The United States was very conservative at that time, yet despite sexual scandals, he survived. They protected him. Nobody will discover who killed certain activists, for example. They protect each other. These killings are ordered when someone discovers something. It's a file burning, something of the mundane world, not something of the spiritual world. But this organization in the world has alliances with the spiritual world, entities that give guidance, directions, methodologies for action. There isn't just one person at the top of the pyramid. There's a kind of council. Currently, the one conducting the orchestra, so to speak, is the founder of the World Economic Forum. He's the one who established the Great Reset. And of course, after 2025, you can imagine there might be a conflict, perhaps another global disease. We think we've had others, but they were regional. Spanish flu, Black Death, Ebola, all regional. This was the first truly global one, and the WHO has already said another is coming, which they're calling Disease X, and they've mentioned its potential impact. There's a Netflix film called Leave the World Behind, with a former US president as executive producer. It contains many predictive elements, as if someone were giving an alert. It's a catastrophic film about what might happen. The film goes to a place where you think, this won't happen, but then you see it is happening. It talks about blackouts, solar storms, though so far nothing has actually caused the blackouts as predicted. But we have experienced internet and GPS outages caused by human actions, with submarine cables being cut for military purposes. Let me tell you about my departure from the group and why I'm not afraid to speak now, though I am being threatened again. When I first published my book, Son of Fire, they threatened me because they didn't know what I had written. But I didn't reveal any secrets. I simply said, this exists. There are people who worship the adversary all over the world. I thought, it was something only in the United States, for example. There was a period of persecution until the book reached them, and then we made a kind of agreement. I made a vow that I would never tell certain things. I made friends there. It's inevitable when you live with people for so many years. Many are still there today. To understand my departure, you need to know that the highest rank is the high priest, the most powerful person in the sect, with more powers, alliances with more powerful entities, more control, and so on. To reach this level, you have to perform a ritual. A type of ritual I had never done before, though I had heard about it. They prepare you very heavily for this, and this ritual consisted of making a human sacrifice, a child. I couldn't do harm to even a cat, so how could I execute an innocent child? I saw this little girl. There's a film called Children of the Privileged that shows exactly what happens. A couple has a child and adopts it out to another couple so you don't develop feelings. You don't have that paternal feeling because you're distant. Then you offer that child to the entity in exchange for something. Everything has a price: power, money, fame, and also protection, being among those who won't be exterminated. This little girl was specifically conceived and then adopted by another couple, similar to that film, Children of the Privileged. Also, bringing up that other Netflix movie again, it talks about disease outbreaks. And now, for the first time in history, avian flu has infected cattle. I predicted this. I told my followers, they'll just need to say that the cattle are contaminated. Brazil has more cattle than people, and we produce enormous amounts of grain. Now we're starting to have problems. Soon after, the World Health Organization said that cattle and crops increase global warming by 30%. There was a fire in Texas that killed 80% of the cattle there. And now this bacteria that has passed to cattle could pass to humans. It's something that mutates very quickly. You can't defeat it. It terminates rapidly. With global warming, another bacteria that was frozen in the Arctic has been thawed out. This is all part of a plan. The Pentagon knows about this and has been preparing for it since the 1960s. The plan is called CONOP 8888. Just search for it online. For those who have anxiety, don't worry. There's a happy ending to all this. This Bacteria lodges in the human brain and makes you completely insane. You don't become a zombie like in The Walking Dead, but you lose your reason, striking, biting, kicking. The planned solution is extermination. There's no other way. So, to explain more about my departure from the group, I made an agreement with them that I would never reveal certain things, not the ritual processes, not where they meet. Now I talk more openly on my closed platform, and I'm being threatened again. The protection comes from God. They say, if you don't shut your mouth, we'll silence you. The message is very clear, but God protects me. God guards me. I trust in God. Divine protection and my faith have never failed me. I've been through so much, but God must not be angry with me for having gone to the dark side and then returned. Like the prodigal son who left his father, and when he returned, the father held a feast. There was no punishment, no penalty, but a celebration. When they marked the date for me to perform the ritual, I simply didn't go. I didn't show up. They said, "You have to do it," and I said no. On the day itself, I didn't go. Of course, they called my house, "We're coming to get you." It wasn't a meeting point anymore. They were coming directly to my home. I'm human. Naturally, I was afraid. I took my bicycle and pedaled all the way to Ipiranga. I stopped in front of an army battalion thinking I'd be protected there. Let's see them try to get me here. I stayed there, lay down on the grass, and spent the night watching the stars in the sky. A thought came to my mind. Wow, God made each of these stars. We know nothing about the universe. We only understand 4% of the observable universe, and God made everything perfect. Everything works in perfect order. There's the phi proportion, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, God's DNA in His creation. We imagine that the brain controls the body, but the first organ to begin developing in the womb is the heart. Where does that energy come from that makes the heart start beating? They've done experiments where they took cardiac muscle cells and mixed them with cells that were going to form neurons, but these cells seem to have a biological destiny. They know when they're in the wrong place, and they return and group where they need to group. You see the perfection of God in all His creation. If you want to feel peace, a sense of connection with God, go to nature. If you lean against a tree, take off your shoes, put your feet on the grass for just 10-15 minutes once a week. That's a cleansing session right there. It's good, you know? People today try to imitate this with YouTube videos of forest sounds in their rooms with the air conditioning at 68 degrees. People recreate this because trees don't envy you. They don't have pride. They're pure like crystals. Somehow, looking at nature, I began to see the truth of all things. The entities I had known couldn't create anything. They could transform matter, but they couldn't create something from absolute nothing. Only God creates. He is the creator. The Bible tells about when Moses confronted Pharaoh and Aaron's staff turned into a serpent. God gave that power. A wooden object became a living organic being. Then Pharaoh's sorcerers did the same thing, showing it wasn't a small power, but high magic. The Egyptians had enormous knowledge. Even today, the pyramids remain a mystery. So what happened in the end? I didn't go to the ritual, and I began to observe everything differently. I had already met with a religious leader before who had prayed for me. He treated me with much love and didn't want to know about my past. I have a testimony on my YouTube channel where I tell this complete story. That meeting was a kind of exorcism. I met with him years later, and he told me it took 3 hours for the entities that were trying to control my body to leave. Channeling doesn't always happen where you lose consciousness. Many times you're conscious of your actions, but you can't control everything. Your senses are heightened. Things happen. He said it took 3 hours, but afterward, I felt for the first time a peace I had never experienced in my life. I left there very happy, very light, not afraid, because he made it very clear, your God is much greater. If a third of the angels rebelled, the majority are still there. The Bible says that angels encamp around us and protect us. I began to study the Bible and saw the case of the prophet Elisha. He was going to be attacked by an army, and he had a young man who helped him, an assistant. He said, "Those who are with us are greater than those who are with them." Then he asked God to open the young man's vision, and he saw in the language of the time, chariots of fire surrounding the mountain, a celestial army providing protection for them. The Bible says that just one angel of God, defeated an entire Assyrian army, 185,000 men. One angel. An angel of God entered Egypt and carried out the 10th plague. Then the Hebrews were liberated and Passover began. That good news. Things were starting to get better. And yes, these angels still exist today, still protecting. We can look at things from the negative side or the positive side. All the apostles went through difficulties and afflictions. Christ himself, who only spoke of love, was crucified. He said, "If you follow me, take up your cross and follow me." He doesn't say, "Grab a parasol and a popsicle and come along." He says, "You will go through afflictions, but I will be with you." He doesn't exempt you from crossing deserts, storms, difficulties, problems, but he gives you strength for the journey. You develop a deeper connection with him when you have faith, and faith is trust. When I saw those stars that night after the pastor had prayed for me, there was no entity near me. I believed there was an angel guarding me, and I was worried about my family. I thought, I wonder if when I get home my father, my mother, my siblings will be there. And they were. I prayed to God for the first time in my life. In my innocence I said, "God, do you remember me? I converted on such and such a day." I gave my full name, tax ID, identity card number, to be specific, because there are billions of people. Innocence, but God listens to our prayers, no matter how simple they may be. I began to study God's word and saw much love. In the early church, when Roman persecution began, believers would go to the arenas praising God. This is historical, not just from Christian sources, but from Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and Eusebius as well. When they were captured by the Romans and thrown to the arenas, to beasts that had been left hungry to massacre and eat them alive, they would kneel and sing worship to God. What kind of faith is that? An indestructible, unshakable faith. What changed this? The adversary is intelligent, he deceived, he's the father of lies, so he changed his strategy. Let's contaminate this model of love. Jesus came to establish love, not Christianity, not the church. It's not that Christians go to heaven and Muslims to hell, that's absurd. He came to bring love. He welcomed everyone who was rejected. The Samaritan was rejected. The tax collector was rejected. Matthew, a disciple of Jesus, was a tax collector. He defended the adulterous woman from being stoned, which was in Mosaic law. He had legitimacy. He had no sin, but he said, "Let him who has no sin cast the first stone." Everyone left, and he was left alone with the woman. He had no sin. He could have thrown a stone, but he didn't. He welcomed her and said, "Go and sin no more. I don't condemn you. You see God's great love, his tenderness." Augusto Cury, whom I had the privilege of meeting personally at a conference, started as a psychologist and psychiatrist. He began studying the personality of Jesus and converted to Christianity because he said, "This man isn't human. His capacity for love and forgiveness is beyond what any human could achieve." What I'm telling you to keep you calm in all this is that your faith protects you and will heal you from anything they might be doing. It's a shield. What you believe is a shield. But be very careful before getting into any strange car, though they don't make those old luxury models anymore. For anyone who's distressed by everything I've shared, there are only two types of people in the world, the good and the evil. God sees your heart. Jesus exalted the Samaritan, noticed the poor widow, touched the lepers. He's full of paradoxes. He's our comforter, yet Jesus wept. The comforter cried. He says he brings an easy and light yoke, yet needed help to carry the cross. This shows that we truly need to share our burdens, pray for one another, be brothers and sisters. There are 7 values that I think are important for you to keep. If you preserve these values, you'll have divine protection. Even though you may go through afflictions, I lost a child, I lost my wife, my faith was never shaken. Of course, I questioned, my God, why? Then I reframed the question to, for what purpose? There must be a purpose for this. All things work together for those who love God. I even had a relapse. Those who follow me know that at the end of 2022, I thought it was all over. I'm fine now, thank God. I had a relapse. I had been treated for depression correctly, medication, psychiatrist, therapy, and was discharged in April 2022. But at the end of the year, I had a relapse because it was near Christmas, near the date when my son passed away. I felt very sad, missed him terribly. It's human. I said to God, God, forgive me. I can't take it anymore. It hurts so much. I've served you for so long, so receive me now. At that moment, I truly sought death as a solution to life. Today, I see it differently. I was in a coma for 4 days. Like Lazarus, who was dead for 4 days. Medically, there was no way I could survive. They even opened the ICU doors for my family to say goodbye to me. When I woke up, they ran many tests. Normally, the protocol is ICU, then semi-intensive care, then a regular room, but I went straight from the ICU to being discharged. The doctor spoke to me. I told her exactly what I had done, the procedure. I knew the combinations, had them at home. Being married to a doctor, you know what can cause death, and I did something so calculated, it would have killed 3 elephants. She said, man, you... She didn't know me, but many doctors and nurses recognized me and came to my room. It was very gratifying. Sometimes I have no idea of the reach of a message. A word, a hug can change a life, a story. Someone who cares about you, when you extend your hand to someone instead of pointing your finger and judging them. Today we see a society that can be so cruel. We need to recover values of goodness and love. That's what I talk about with my Guardians group, reclaiming these values. The Bible tells us to give thanks in all things. When I thanked God, Lord, thank you for the time you gave me with my son, with my wife. A weight, a burden was lifted from my shoulders. Now I'm married again, with 2 wonderful stepchildren who are like my own children. They call me Dad. I'm a biological father again too. I have my Guardians group, and finally, I can teach everything I've learned. I'm not afraid. I know God guards me and protects me. Keep these 7 values in your life. Honor, loyalty, discipline to study and grow, honoring sacred values, loyalty to your word. Don't promise something you won't deliver. Be loyal to your friend, don't betray them, don't lie. That's being loyal. And love, true love, unconditional love. You know how our brain rewards us with dopamine when we help someone in need, like giving a blanket to a homeless person who can't do anything for us in return. Prayer is also very important. The frontal lobe is irrigated with blood when you pray. How can you have faith, and faith is trust? How can you trust someone you don't know? That's why prayer matters. Of all the miracles Jesus performed, the people wanted to know, teach us to pray. Nobody said, teach me how to turn water into wine. I want to learn that secret. No, they asked for prayer. So it's about faith, love, and hope. Never stop having hope. Believe God is greater. There's no reason to fear if you're with God. He's with you. He protects his true children. They are guarded. That's why I don't fear. I have nothing to fear. I'm not afraid of the threats they make because I know God has a mission for me. And when it's complete, God will allow me to go in his time. So be at peace. As the Bible would say, do not be afraid, I am with you. He said this to Joshua, do not be afraid. I am with you wherever you go. It's wonderful that I came from one spectrum and moved to another. Now I'm in the spectrum of good, which is the most important thing. The question of true love, generosity. People aren't generous anymore. These values have been lost. We need to reclaim them. Don't do things just out of fear. Do things because you want to. I think that's what's important. I would like to close with this. In everything, give thanks. When I thanked God for the time he gave me with my son and my wife, a burden was lifted from my shoulders. Now I'm married again with 2 wonderful stepchildren who call me Dad. I'm a biological father again too. I have my Guardians group. And finally, I can teach everything I've learned without fear, knowing God guards and protects me. Hold on to 7 values in your life. Honor, loyalty, discipline, sacred values, keeping your word, true unconditional love, and hope. Never stop having hope. Believe that God is greater. There's no reason to fear when you're with him. He protects his true children. As the Bible says, do not be afraid, for I am with you. These words were spoken to Joshua, and they apply to us today. Do not be afraid, for I am with you wherever you go. Let me share something about hell that might be surprising. In my understanding, there isn't a place of eternal torment as many imagine. Hell is more about reaping what you sow. What you plant, you harvest. Sometimes hell exists right here on earth. There can be situations where your conscience brings you to a state that feels like hell. There is a dimension where we pay for what we've done, which could be called hell, but it isn't eternal. It can't be eternal, because that wouldn't be just. Think about it. You live 50 years, make one mistake, and then spend eternity being punished. That's not justice. The word eternal might better be understood as for an indeterminate time. It's like when the Bible says God doesn't repent, yet Scripture tells us that God repented of making Saul king of Israel, repented of creating mankind. These aren't contradictions. God changed his mind about certain decisions. To close this discussion on redemption, I read a book called The Shack. The movie wasn't as good, but there's a scene that deeply moved me. It tells the story of a man whose daughter was murdered, and he wanted punishment for her killer. There comes a moment when God says to him, "Now you'll sit on the throne and judge." God presents him with a scenario. You have 2 children. Your son is doing many wrong things, stealing from your wallet, keeping bad company, heading down a terrible path. Your daughter is a good girl. Now you must choose one to send to heaven and one to hell. That father becomes so desperate that he cries out, No, I can't send either of my children to hell. I'll go in their place." That's exactly what Jesus did for us. He took our place, paid the price for us. The Bible speaks in 1 Peter or 2 Peter chapter 3 about Jesus preaching to the spirits in prison. He descended to preach to those who were imprisoned, those who had rebelled in Noah's time, who hadn't accepted Noah's message. Jesus, the liberator, the Prince of Peace, didn't go to mock them or taunt them. He went to set them free, saying, "Your time is over. I've come to liberate you, to take you out of here." So no, hell isn't eternal, but I'm certain it's still a terrible place to be for however long one might be there. What matters most is that through faith, through love, through living according to God's principles, we can experience heaven, both in this life and beyond. That's the message of hope I want to leave with you. No matter how dark your past, no matter what you've done or been involved with, redemption is always possible. God's love is greater than any darkness, and His forgiveness reaches farther than any sin. As I come to the end of sharing my story with you, I want you to understand that my journey from darkness to light wasn't simple or easy. It took courage, faith, and divine intervention. The path I walked, from a curious 17-year-old boy to a high-ranking member of a dark organization, and finally to a man of faith, represents the full spectrum of human spiritual experience. The world isn't as simple as many would like to believe. There are forces at work behind the scenes, both spiritual and worldly, that influence the events we see playing out on the global stage. I've been on both sides, and I can tell you that the battle between light and darkness is very real. But here's what I want you to take away from my testimony. No matter how deep into darkness you've gone, no matter what you've done or what's been done to you, there is always a way back to the light. The journey may be difficult, but it's possible. God's love and forgiveness are greater than any sin, any mistake, any wrong turn. Today, I live without fear. Yes, I still receive threats from those who wish to silence me, but I know that God protects me. I have a new family, a new purpose, and a peace that I never experienced during my years in the organization. The darkness couldn't hold me, and it doesn't have to hold you either. If you're struggling with darkness in your own life, whether it's depression, addiction, harmful relationships, or even involvement in dangerous spiritual practices, know that you can walk away. You can choose light, you can choose love, you can choose faith. Remember the 7 values I mentioned: honor, loyalty, discipline, respect for sacred values, keeping your word, love, and hope. These aren't just nice ideas, they're spiritual. Armor that will protect you in this world where both good and evil are very real. In closing, I want to remind you of what Jesus said to Joshua. "Do not be afraid, for I am with you wherever you go." This promise has sustained me through my darkest moments, through loss and pain, through threats and uncertainty. It can sustain you too. My name once belonged to the darkness, now it belongs to the light. My story once served as a warning, now it serves as hope. My life once centered around secrets and power, now it's devoted to truth and service. This transformation wasn't my doing, it was God's. And what He did for me, He can do for anyone who turns to Him with a sincere heart. That's the message I leave with you today. May you find your way to the light, whatever darkness you may be facing. May you discover the peace that I've found, and may you too become a beacon of hope for others who are still finding their way. Thank you for listening to my story. May it serve its purpose in your life, whatever that may be.